Title: The Midnight Drive Through New York. As the clock struck midnight, Sarah's heart pounded with excitement and fear. She had always heard stories about the dangers of driving through New York City at night, but she couldn't resist the allure of the city's vibrant nightlife. With her friend Emily by her side, they embarked on what would become the most terrifying drive of their lives. The city was eerily quiet as they entered, the towering skyscrapers casting ominous shadows on the deserted streets. Sarah's hands trembled on the steering wheel as they navigated the labyrinthine maze of roads, trying to find their way to the club they had heard so much about. The GPS on her phone flickered and died, leaving them utterly lost in the concrete jungle. Emily's voice quivered as she whispered, "Sarah, I have a bad feeling about this." Sarah tried to reassure her friend, but deep down she couldn't shake the unsettling sensation that something was terribly wrong. The city seemed to be closing in on them, the buildings growing taller and more menacing with every turn. As they passed a dimly lit alley, Sarah caught a glimpse of a figure lurking in the shadows. It was a man, his face obscured by a tattered hood. He stared at them with unblinking eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. Sarah sped up, hoping to put some distance between them and the mysterious stranger, but he followed, his presence looming ever closer. With each block they travelled, the city's ambience grew more sinister. Unearthly whispers seemed to emanate from the very walls of the buildings, and Emily's fear escalated into full-blown panic. She urged Sarah to turn back, but every route they attempted only led them deeper into the city's ominous heart. As they passed an abandoned subway station, a bone-chilling screech pierced the air. Sarah slammed on the brakes, causing the car to skid to a halt. They sat in silence, trembling, as the screech echoed around them, growing louder and more otherworldly with each passing second. It was a sound like nothing they had ever heard before, a sound that seemed to claw at their sanity. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the screech stopped, leaving them in a state of shock. They exchanged terrified glances before reluctantly deciding to continue their journey. But the city had more horrors in store for them. As they rounded a corner, they came upon a street filled with abandoned cars, their doors left wide open. It was as if the entire population of the city had vanished into thin air, leaving their vehicles behind. The eerie sight sent shivers down their spines, and they couldn't help but feel as though they were being watched by unseen eyes. Sarah desperately tried to call for help, but her phone had no signal and Emily's had mysteriously died. They were utterly alone in a city that had become a nightmare. Desperation drove them to press on, and they soon found themselves in the heart of Times Square. The neon lights that usually illuminated the area had all gone out, leaving the iconic square shrouded in darkness. The empty billboards seemed to mock them, displaying cryptic messages in an unknown language. As they passed through Times Square, they noticed a figure standing in the center of the road. It was a woman, dressed in a tattered white gown, her long black hair covering her face. Sarah swerved to avoid hitting her, but the woman didn't move. Instead, she slowly raised her head, revealing a face devoid of eyes, only empty sockets that seemed to bore into their souls. The car screeched to a halt, and the woman let out a blood-curdling scream that reverberated through the empty streets. Sarah and Emily covered their ears, tears streaming down their faces. They were trapped, surrounded by an unending nightmare. In their panic, they tried to flee on foot, but no matter which direction they ran, they always found themselves back in Times Square, trapped in an endless loop of horror. The eyeless woman continued to scream, her wails growing louder and more tormenting with each repetition. Hours turned into days, and their sanity began to unravel. They could no longer tell if they were awake or trapped in a never-ending nightmare. The city had become their prison, and the horrors that lurked in its dark corners showed no mercy. As the screams of the eyeless woman echoed around them, Sarah and Emily realized that they would never escape the clutches of the city. They had ventured into the heart of darkness, and there was no way out.